Hello, and welcome to the Skillful podcast, where we explore DBT and RODBT skills to help you reduce emotional suffering, improve your relationships, and become more present in your life. I'm your host, Marielle Berg, a psychotherapist at the Bay Area DBT and Couples Counseling Center. Hello, and thanks for joining us for the third episode of the Skillful podcast, where I'll be joined again by Ed Fowler, and we'll be discussing what you actually do to practice mindfulness in the DBT framework. Welcome back, Ed. Today we're going to be talking about the what skills of DBT. And the what skills are what you actually do to be mindful. In our last episode, we were talking about wise mind, which is a place that, an internal state that incorporates both emotion and logic, so we can reach a place of wise mind. So today we're going to be talking about the what skills of mindfulness. And the reason they're called the what skills is because they are what you actually do to practice mindfulness in the DBT framework.
Yes.
And we do the what skills one at a time.
Yes.
Do you want to get us started just giving us a rundown on what exactly the what skills are?
Sure, definitely. So in DBT, we think about three ways of practicing mindfulness, things that we can do to practice being mindful, being in the present moment. One is to observe. The second is to describe what we are observing. And the third is to participate. And each of them is a different approach to really being in the present moment.
Yes. And then we'll be discussing, not today, but in a subsequent episode, the how skills, which are the companion to the what skills. So the how skills are how you do the what skills. But to start with today, it's all about these three what skills: the observe, the describe, and participate. So observe is, as it sounds, it's essentially noticing what's going on around you, so externally, and noticing what's going on inside of you, internally. So it's the direct notice of sensory experience. One way to think about it is to think about observe as a way to help you notice what you feel, what you sense, what you see, what you taste, what you touch, and what you hear, without labeling it, reacting to it, or judging it.
And that's what I appreciate about observing as a mindfulness practice, is just noticing. And when we talk about the how skills, one of them is non-judgmentalness, because oftentimes I will notice what's going on around me or notice what's going on within me with a judgment of like this, that's good, that's bad, that I don't like that, that's shouldn't be that way. And observing mindfully helps me to just pay attention, to just take a moment to just notice. What are the physical sensations I might be experiencing? What emotions might I be experiencing? What is around me? Rather than trying to judge them, just to observe.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this can be really tricky for most people, especially at first, because our minds sort of naturally want to label and judge whatever experience we're having, rather than just being with the bare sensations of the experience. So when we're observing, we're allowing the immediate experience to just kind of be there without pushing it away or trying to change it. And as you said, this desire to want to push away or try to change our experience often comes from judgments. I don't like this. I do like this. This has to change. This is awful. This is wonderful.
Yeah, I want more of this. I don't want any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And when I am practicing observing mindfully, I'm just being in it.
Yes. The observe skill, so it has many benefits. And the main one, which is the one we're talking about, is it helps us detach our judgments and assessments from what's actually happening And I think it can have another benefit in that it can help you feel more alive in the moment you're actually in, instead of kind of lost thinking about the past or like planning for the future, which can lead someone to feel like they're not truly, like they're kind of sleepwalking through life.
Right. And for me, one of the ways that I remember to practice mindfulness is that for me, the opposite of mindfulness is mindlessness. And I spend a lot of time mindlessly moving through my life on autopilot, just doing things. And mindfully observing gives me a chance to be in the moment, be in my life, to observe what's around me, to not just say, it's a cloudy day, but to look and see, what are the clouds like? What am I noticing in those clouds? What else do I notice in my senses when I'm looking at those clouds? It's about not just being on autopilot, but to be able to fully engage.
Yeah, there's such a richness to it when we can allow ourselves to observe in that way.
And one of the things I appreciate about in DBT is that we really are just focusing on for a moment. It doesn't have to be for half an hour or hours or 5 minutes. It can be, let me just, as I'm walking down the street, observe what's around me for 30 seconds or 60 seconds and have that moment of being present without pressure to do more.
I love that you brought that up, because I think so often with mindfulness, people can feel, and I know I have felt it myself, that now I have to be mindful all the time. I need to live a mindful life, which is great if you want to pursue that. And that can feel really daunting and overwhelming because we have stuff to get done. We got shit to do. Maybe we want to, I don't know if that wants to be edited out, but we got shit to do. I'm okay swearing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that for me, I am conscientious of DBT's encouragement of do it for a second if that's what you're able to do, because I really struggle to be mindful for more than a short period of time. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I do a little bit every day. I'm able to remember and do a little every single day, to have a couple of moments here and there. And the observe skill is the one that I find to be the one I do the most, to just mindfully observe what's happening within me, what's happening around me, just for a second, because I can't handle more than that.
And do you notice as you're doing it regularly every day for short periods of time that muscle is growing, or it's getting a little bit easier?
When people talk about mindfulness, oftentimes it's like go away to a quiet place and really be mindful in the moment. And that's what I used to have to do. I really wasn't able to practice mindfulness other than that. And then I didn't want to do that because I have shit to do. So I don't have time to go and be quiet and mindful for 10 minutes. And so now, I'm able to click into it pretty quickly, even when I would like to be able to spend a little bit more time with mindfulness practice, so longer periods when I'm doing it. And I'm able to do it on a moment's notice pretty much anywhere. Just when I notice maybe that my mind is racing, it's like, hold on a second, just come back to what am I observing around me right now?
Nice. I mean, I can certainly relate to that. And while it's wonderful if you have the time and space to set aside time to meditate, it's not what we're talking about and what we're teaching in DBT. I feel like that's one way to really strengthen the muscle of mindfulness. But really what we want listeners to get is that the observe and all the mindfulness skills in DBT are about bringing mindfulness and awareness to your everyday life to help reduce reactivity, increase feelings of aliveness and being connected to others, and decrease emotional suffering.
Exactly.
Yeah. With many of the mindfulness skills, these are concepts we're talking about. And I think one of the best ways to get a sense of these skills is to actually practice. So I'm going to lead you in a very brief observe skill. So obviously if you're driving, don't necessarily do this. You need to be focusing on the road, but if you're able to take a moment of quiet in whatever context you're listening to this, to sit down and practice some observe, go for it. So ideally, you're sitting someplace comfortably. What I want you to do is pretty simple. So we're going to focus on your sense of hearing, of what you hear. So sit quietly, and I'll be quiet for a minute or so. And I just want you to observe the sounds around you. You might observe the sound of your breath, any background noises, the heater or the air conditioner, or street noises, or the wind, if your window's open and it's windy, just for the next minute, observing sounds. And if your mind has wandered, gently bringing it back to just observing the sounds around you. Okay, coming back. I'm wondering, Ed, if you can say just a little bit about how that small observe exercise was. What did you notice?
It's fascinating. I've never noticed this before, but just being really quiet, I noticed, oh, my ears are kind of ringing. And I'm like, are my ears always ringing? And I'm not mindful enough to notice? I don't know. I appreciate that one because it's so focused. Like, just notice what I'm hearing. And when we practice mindfulness in like our skills group, we will do what you did, which is to remind us that if our mind wanders, bring it back. And for me, always my mind has wandered. So as soon as someone says, if your mind has wandered, bring it back, like, oh, my mind wandered. And it's such a helpful reminder. And I think for me, I really appreciate that encouragement of our minds will wander. Our minds are built to think, so they're going to think. And when we're trying to practice mindfulness for a minute or two, our mind is going to wander. And the practice is really just to notice my mind has wandered and to bring it back to, in this case, listening and just hearing notice when I'm hearing. I appreciated that reminder that, like, yeah, let my mind go and then bring it back.
Yes. Anyone listening who just tried this with us can relate to Ed's experience. That's completely normal. Our minds do wander, especially if you're new to mindfulness. That's going to happen. But even if you've been doing it a long time and you bring it back, that's the practice of mindfulness. When we're practicing observe, it really helps you be in the here and now, experiencing reality as it is. So it's a skill that can help you feel much more awake in your life. And when you're awake, you're much more likely to be able to access a more calm, centered, wise mind place in yourself. That's really one of the main goals of observe.
Definitely.
So that's our observe skill. We're going to move on to the next what skill. And again, you do these one at a time, although describe can often come sort of on the heels of observe. So when we're observing, it's a wordless watching. We're just noticing without adding any kind of labels or judgments or interpretations. So the describe skill is putting words to what you observe, whether that's an emotion, a sensation, or a thought. And here's the kind of tricky part. And you alluded to this earlier in terms of judgments, that when you describe, you are sticking to the facts, just the who, what, when, and where. And you're leaving out your interpretations or your assumptions.
And I find using describe for mindfulness to often be a little easier than using observe, because my mind tends to wander a lot, and putting words to what I'm observing can help me stay a little bit more focused. So sometimes I'm able to just sit and observe and notice, and sometimes I need to put words to it. What helps me with using describe for mindfulness is really making an effort to stick to the facts, to describe what I am observing as factually as possible. So leaving out my assumptions, leaving out my interpretations, my opinions, and just trying to describe it as simply as I can.
Right. So let's talk about an example to help illustrate what we're discussing here. So imagine you're at a cafe with a good friend. It's a meeting you've been really looking forward to. You want to catch up with them, and your friend keeps shifting in their seat, sort of like looking around them, turning their head. They're pretty fidgety as you guys are talking, and that's starting to make you anxious. So if you begin to interpret their behavior, you might jump to conclusions. You might find that you have a lot of opinions or a judgment. You might get worried that your friend is angry with you, or that they're bored and they don't want to be there, or maybe that they don't really care about you anymore. And so if you're using the describe skill, you would just be labeling what you're noticing. Oh, my friend is shifting in their seat a lot. Oh, they're turning their head. You can also describe, so that's externally, you can also describe what's going on internally. I'm having worry thoughts as she's doing this or they're doing it. I'm starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable, which is different than where your head might go. So when you say, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable or anxious or having worry thoughts, it gives you a little bit of breathing room internally, which is different than just being in the anxious or worry thoughts. So I'm getting into now the place of internally describing.
Yeah, I think that is such a good example because I know I am used to, and I think many of us are used to, constantly interpreting what's going on around us. In order to be effective in our lives, we have to be able to interpret to a certain extent. I think for me, my interpretations are often based on my own opinions and judgments rather than facts, and can easily increase my emotional reactivity. So someone's shifting around. Why are they doing this? What's wrong? What's wrong with them? What's wrong with me? And the mindful describe skill is just the breaking it down to they are shifting, they're turning their head. I am noticing worried thoughts. And there's such a different quality to that perspective than what's wrong, what am I doing, what are they doing, who's wrong, is it me or them?
Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you can start believing it and acting from that perspective. So if you're getting angry at them or angry at yourself, that can shift the whole nature of the interaction, and it can become a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
Versus if you can describe, first of all, it'll probably calm you down a bit. And secondly, it might bring up some curiosity. And maybe you decide you want to ask your friend, like, hey, I'm noticing you're shifting around, like just wondering what's going on. Who knows?
And again, there's a very different quality to I'm noticing that you're shifting around a lot versus what's wrong.
Right.
Why do you keep looking around?
Right. Are you bored with what I'm talking about?
And so again, practicing the mindful describe skill, not necessarily in this kind of conversation, helps me build that ability that I can use in a moment where I might need it the most, which interpersonally is often like that's where it's the most helpful. Right. Is being able to describe. If I am practicing describing mindfully on a regular basis, it's a lot easier to pull myself back and say, this person is shifting, they're looking around, and to say, I'm noticing you're shifting and looking around. For me, I find it easier to practice describing with something like, like something I'm holding in my hand, and describing what the quality of the texture is or what I am seeing with my eyes, that kind of thing. And that's a way to build that skill that then I can use when I need it.
So you're talking about the very tactile, which I think is a great way to begin to experiment with describe on your own. So you can do this with any object. You can grab a pen or anything around you and sit there and, an everyday object and really describe it. The color, the weight, without judgment. And that's a way of honing the describe muscle. And I think that might be our segue into trying an observe and describe mindfulness exercise together. So again, if you're in a safe place to get mindful, do that. Otherwise, you can always, of course, pause this recording and come back to it if you want to try it a different time when you have a moment to sit down and focus. So again, get yourself comfortable sitting somewhere or lying down. This will just be a couple minutes. And you can either close your eyes or look downward. And turn your focus internally to your internal world. And observe if there are any sensations happening in your body right now. So that could be a certain feeling in some of your muscles or your stomach or your throat or anywhere really. You're just observing any sensations present in your body. And now add words to what you're observing. Again, just sticking to the facts. So describing the sensations you are observing. That could be my shoulder muscles are tight, or my stomach is rumbling, or my hands feel warm in my lap. Whatever it might be, you're just describing the physical sensations you're noticing in your body right now. And if a judgment comes up as you're describing, such as my jaw is really clenched tight, I hate this about myself, why am I so wound up all the time? You can describe that to yourself. Oh, I'm having a judgment about the tension in my jaw. I'm having an emotion about it. Okay, and you can begin to shift your focus back. So that was just a little taste of describe coupled with observe for what's going on in your internal world. How was that for you, Ed?
That was helpful. And I was aware that I often don't notice my body sensations during the day and the nuances of it. And using the describe skill helped a lot to be able to focus my mind on putting words to the sensations and cutting off the judgments. So noticing, for instance, my fingertips feel cold. And my mind went to, oh my God, why are my fingers so cold? And just pulling it back to my fingertips feel cold and noticing the quality of the pressure of my feet in my shoes. Little nuances that I don't usually notice, and then trying to describe like my feet, I can feel pressure in my shoes. And it did really keep my mind more focused than just observing, to try to put words to it. And that's what I appreciate about the describe skill.
Mm-hmm. So noticing a lot more than you would normally just going about your day-to-day life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One other thing about describe, it can be incredibly helpful if you're in the throes of an intense emotion. So let's take anger, for example. Anger is a very sort of hot kind of feeling, can feel very overwhelming when you're in the middle of it. And if you can use observe and describe to just notice the sensations related to anger in your body, so it could be a clenching of your fists, could be a flushing of your face, whatever it might be, and describe to yourself, oh, I'm feeling really angry right now. There is such a difference internally versus just being in the anger. You've already created a bit of distance. It's the part of you that's witnessing your experience rather than being identified with it 100%.
I find this really, really helpful.
Yeah, me too. So it's quite powerful. That's describe and observe. Let's move on to our last what skill, which is participate. And I'm going to let you begin describing participate, Ed, because you know it's one I struggle with.
And it's one that I find particularly helpful. And again, I think it's such a good reminder that with any DBT skill, and certainly with the mindfulness skills, there are ones that we're going to really be drawn to and find really helpful and easy to engage with. And there are going to be other skills that we struggle with, or we find this doesn't actually really work for me in this way. And so it's good just to know what works for you and what doesn't, to try to stretch ourselves a little bit and to use what we're going to use. So when we get into effectiveness, we get to talk about using the skill that you will actually try. The participate skill for mindfulness is the opposite of observing and describing. So with both observing and describing, we're taking a step back and having more of a distant view of what's happening. Whereas with participating, we are throwing ourselves into what we're doing. So we are not removed, we are fully in it. Really trying to let go of self-consciousness, let go of awareness of our own participation, and just be in the moment doing whatever we are doing. So that could be fully engaging in a conversation and really listening to the other person rather than planning what I'm going to say next or thinking about what did they mean when they said that, but just really truly listening. That's a form of participating. To be involved in an activity like a game or a puzzle or something like that and just fully be in it. And if my mind starts to wander, so that I really like to do Sudoku puzzles. And if my mind is wandering and I'm thinking and I'm not really in it, to just pull it back to fully engaging in that puzzle that I'm doing. Those are examples of how we use participation to anchor ourselves to the present moment.
Really nice description. It's really the opposite. Participate is the opposite of sitting on the sidelines and watching. You're throwing yourself in 100% without self-consciousness. And most young kids are great at this. They can become completely absorbed in whatever they're doing. I took my little nieces to see a bubble show, which was essentially millions of bubbles being blown into the audience. And they were on their feet screaming and laughing and grabbing for their bubbles, trying to catch them, not self-conscious, not thinking, how do I look? Am I yelling too loud? Right. Any of that, they're 100% in that. And there's so much joy and aliveness that can happen.
Right. And that's such a good example. I think as adults, we become so self-conscious and aware of ourselves, self-aware, that it can be hard to appreciate and enjoy those types of experiences. It can be hard to enjoy those type of experiences. And we, using the mindfulness skill of participating, we can actually throw ourselves in so that we can have those moments of just really being in it and having fun. Sometimes participation is about doing something fun and fully enjoying it. Sometimes it's not necessarily fun. Mm-hmm. It's just really, truly being in it. Right. For me, I find it really helpful to bring down social anxiety and self-consciousness. I find it, again, fully participating in something can be easier than trying to sit back and observe. So if I'm having trouble getting into the current moment, I can do it by participating. And so that is turning off that self-conscious part of my mind.
And I like that you brought in that it's not always something fun, although it certainly can be, but we can participate while doing a mundane activity like washing the dishes.
Right.
So allowing yourself to be fully with the experience of doing something like that or any kind of household chore. So you're throwing yourself 100% into the activity. If you're in a classroom discussion, for example, it's allowing yourself to participate in the conversation without worrying what your classmates think about you. And I think one of the classic examples, or at least that I think about with participate, is dancing. So if you've ever tried to dance and you've wondered or worried, how do I look? Am I doing this right? What do other people think of me? What's your experience of dancing?
Yeah, so miserable.
Right? It's awful.
and terrible dancing. That's a judgment, yes. But nonetheless.
It might look terrible. I know we have a judgment here, but internally, it's no fun. It does not feel good.
Right. For me, I can tell when I have that experience or when I'm watching other people, for instance, dancing, Or if you go to like an improv show and you watch people, like they just seem to really be having fun in the moment, and they're more fluid and more interesting because they're in it, as opposed to thinking about what they're doing. And for me, I really appreciate the opportunities to turn that thinking off and just be in the moment.
Absolutely. I don't think about this that much with the skill, but that's one of the amazing things about it is it allows you to turn your mind off for a little bit and fully be in. So if you're like sports, I think, or any kind of physical activity where you can actually turn your mind off is great for this.
Exactly.
And participate also helps if you experience feelings of alienation or otherness, like apart from the world. So participating helps you feel like you're a part of, not apart from, because you're going with the flow and you're kind of doing, if it's a group activity, what others are doing. And not participating, doing the opposite, I think hurts because it can keep you sort of forever on the outside, sort of like witnessing your life rather than fully being immersed in it. And that it's painful to just be a witness or only observing your life and never sort of being fully in it.
Yeah.
Just a note about addictive behaviors. So, because sometimes people might ask, because there's a way that addictive behaviors can feel like participating, because those kind of behaviors can become very ritualized. So it can sometimes feel like you're very in the present moment with your ritual around whatever the behavior is. So to remember that participating includes acting intuitively from your wise mind, which means that your actions are in service of your long-term goals. So in that way, addictive behaviors, although it might feel like participating, is not what we're talking about here. It's not a way of participating mindfully from your wise mind.
And I think people often describe participating in addictive behaviors as being on autopilot in a lot of ways.
Right.
And that's the opposite of mindfulness.
Yes, that's a great way to think about it too.
So with observing, describing, participating, 3 different and equally beneficial ways to practice mindfulness. One moment at a time, when we can, in our everyday lives. That's the benefit of using these skills, is that we just are able to fully engage when we notice that we need that.
Great. I echo everything you say. It's a nice way to summarize what we've talked about today. Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. To learn more, or if you're in the Bay Area and want to get started with therapy, you can find us online at bayarea.dbtcc.com. That's bayarea.dbtcc.com.